Hi there, welcome back to IndyCar on the 7th of July. Now, most of us, I'm sure, will have been watching the TV coverage, unfortunately, sometimes it's unavoidable, of the King at Edinburgh during the last few days, and his massive pageant that paraded down the Royal Mile, including his luxury limousine. I noticed that he did not decide to use the open landau, that's the horse and carriage which normally is used, or was normally used by his mother, the late Queen. So it was a bulletproof, basically a bulletproof car he was in, with a glass roof so people could see him. And I noticed during the coverage one particular photograph that was posted online which showed the royal cavalcade of opulence and wealth slowly driving past. What looked to me, at least, like a very, I think, scruffy looking set of flats with a lot of students hanging out the window chanting protests. Now I think this encapsulates exactly what royalty, what the monarchy is all about. It's about parading this unearned wealth in front of people who have virtually nothing, and it's about rubbing the noses of the peasantry in the fact that they have this massively wealthy head of state who can come and go as he pleases. Not something which I would support. I'm very much a Republican. I believe in elected heads of state. However, looking at the coverage, you'll notice that something didn't happen in Edinburgh, and that was the King never got a coronation in Edinburgh. He was crowned in England. Yes, they took the Stone of Destiny, well, the alleged Stone of Destiny, nobody's quite sure whether it is the original one or not, and of course he sat on that and he was crowned the King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and basically that was it. So it was assumed, and it is assumed by virtually everybody in the media, and most people in England, I suspect, that he's the king of everywhere in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, that's not actually the case, and the reason why the king was allowed to look but not touch the crown was not because it's particularly fragile, which was the excuse the BBC gave, but simply because he's not the King of Scots. And he's not the King of Scots for a couple of very important constitutional legal reasons. The first one is, when he was crowned in England, when he was crowned in London, he gave what's known as the accession oath, which is him promising to uphold the law of the land and to uphold the rights and freedoms of its citizens. Now, when he gives this oath, he's not giving the oath of the Scottish king, he's giving the oath of the English king. And the crown in England is vested with all the power, and the crown acts through its parliament. So the king's really the head of state. He doesn't get to tell everybody what to do anymore, but it is his family, if you like, the tradition of the royal family of England, who are at the centre of the British establishment in London. But it doesn't really extend over the border because we have completely different laws. Now, you may have noticed that during his speech, if you want to call it that, during the ceremony in Edinburgh, in fact, before that even, when he gave his accession speech in London, he was taken into a side room and had to swear to uphold the claim of right. Now, you might think, well, that's great, because that's the Constitution of Scotland. He's sworn to uphold it, so therefore he must be the lawful monarch. Except he didn't actually swear to uphold all of the claim of right. It was a selected part of the conditions of the claim of right which were sworn to, and the only thing he actually swore to do was to uphold the sectarian bit of the old claim of right from 1707, which was that he was going to be the protector and the upholder of the Protestant faith across the entire United Kingdom, and incidentally including in Scotland. So he never actually swore the oath of allegiance to the Scottish crown at all, and he certainly never swore to uphold and protect the entire claim of right, which includes the Constitution of Scotland, which also includes the sovereignty of the people, not the king. So he can't wear the crown of Scotland because legally he hasn't sworn to uphold the claim of right at all. He's only sworn to uphold a little bit of it that was selected to be broadcast. So technically he's not quite the king. The other thing is that in order to become the King of Scotland, you have to swear the Scottish royal oath, and the Scottish royal oath has never been sworn to by King Charles. And because of that, he's not entitled to wear the crown. It's not because it's fragile and might fall apart in his hands, it's because he's not entitled to wear it. And all of the officials presenting the honours of Scotland, as they're known, crown jewels I prefer to call them, he gets the look, but he doesn't get to touch them. And he cannot go back down to London wearing that Scottish crown, because he's not allowed to, because he actually isn't the King of Scots, because he has not recognised even, or upheld, or defended the right of the people of Scotland to their sovereignty. So he is not the lawful king. And I think what was delightful about the coverage, and I'm hoping most of you will agree with me, is that the numbers of people who were shouting that he was not their king easily drowned out the cheering crowds of tourists, because it was mostly tourists who were doing the cheering and clapping and the photographing. The entire event was largely staged for an international audience, I think. And the worthies of Edinburgh and the ones who are part of the British establishment in Edinburgh, who play their role in this, wearing funny hats and silly costumes in the British tradition, are basically play acting, because they know, as well as everyone else in the entire British establishment located in Edinburgh, that this is all a big sham. This is just a parade. It's a piece of street theatre. It's designed to convey the impression that Scotland has a king, when it actually doesn't. And so because of that, what was being chanted by the protesters is actually true. And what was being basically touted by the BBC and lots of other mainstream media outlets is nonsense. I noticed even the Daily Record 2 days ago had a banner headline saying, "The King of the World." I mean, what? The King of the World? I mean, okay, King of United Kingdom, you could possibly make that claim, and even though it's not accurate, but the King of the World, really? I don't think so. So he's not allowed to wear the crown, and he has to go back home without it, and basically that's it. End of story. The whole thing is over. The big sham, the whole media circus moves back to London, and that's Scotland done. We're all now convinced that Charlie is the king, except he isn't. And the other thing that's interesting happening at the moment is, in the course of sort of researching things, especially about small countries becoming independent, you occasionally learn something useful. And one of the useful things I think I'd like to pass on to you today are the wise words of an international, I'm trying to think how you would describe this man. He's an academic, but he looks at the practicalities of becoming an independent small nation. And the two most important things, according to this particular constitutional international legal expert, were any new small country needs two fundamental things, and it must have them in order for its economy to be secure, and also for it to be able to grow that economy. And the first of those is a surprising one: food. Now, when you think about this, when you become an independent country, yeah, you do need food, don't you? Because how are you going to grow your economy if people don't have anything to eat? The other problem is that you don't want to be importing all your food, because then that means money is flowing out of your economy and benefiting somebody else in some other country. So you really want what's known as food security, and that means your farms and your producers need to produce sufficient food of high enough quality and with a big enough variety to support the entire population. That kind of goes without saying, really, when you think about it. Now, the other interesting thing he said was an absolute essential, along with food, is energy. Control of all your energy resources. In order for an economy to grow, the people must be well fed, well nourished, able to work hard, wanting to work hard, but there must be enough energy available for that economy to expand. You need power to power industrial machinery. You need power for street lighting, for homes and businesses, for heating and so on. That has to come first as well. So both of these major assets of a nation have to be secured by that new nation before anything else happens. When you talk about energy resources, Scotland has an embarrassingly large amount of them. Now, when we talk about energy, we usually think about electricity, And yes, we have a lot of that. In fact, we probably make more than twice what we actually need. So that's great. We have that energy, but it doesn't actually belong to us. Now, the reason it doesn't belong to us is because the British government privatised the energy industry. In the old days, our electricity was generated by so-called electricity boards, and in Scotland there used to be two of them. There was the South of Scotland Electricity Board, and there was the Hydro Board, which covered most of the Highlands. And these two boards produced all of the energy, and they were publicly owned. They were owned by the state on behalf of the people, so the energy bills were nice and low. The energy was produced at cost. Any small profits made were to cope with inflation or to raise some additional funding for investment in the national grid. Brilliant. And that's what we actually need to have back. And that means basically taking back control over the means of production, the generating capacity. That would mean taking back control of all of the wind farms offshore and onshore. It would mean taking charge of the tidal turbine arrays which have been installed between Orkney and the mainland in the Pentland Firth. And then we come to oil and gas. Now, we know that oil and gas are massive resources inside the territorial waters of Scotland. About 65% of the available oil production for the entire United Kingdom comes from the Scottish sector, or as the British accountants in Whitehall like to call it, an unknown region. So we have 65% of the oil revenues sitting there waiting for us. We have slightly less, I think, in terms of gas reserves. The English sector of the North Sea contains more gas fields than the Scottish sector, but that doesn't really matter. We've got plenty of gas, and new gas fields can be drilled and exploited all the time. Now, although gas technically is carbon-based fuel, it has a lot less carbon in it than, for example, coal or oil, and that makes it a much more valuable intermediate resource when we're trying to decarbonise. Oil, on the other hand, I would say is a strategic resource, and by that I mean a country can borrow against it. It has a monetary value. In fact, so does gas. And you can estimate the gas and oil reserves in the Scottish sector probably in the trillions of pounds or dollars. And that means you have collateral to borrow, which is something which all small nations need to do from time to time. So we must have control of it. And this is why I believe, and this is not incidentally criticism of the SNP's policy, but to be realistic, if we were to win, let's say, the next general election on an independence-only ticket, so a plebiscite election, and the result of that was to be negotiating independence with England, England would demand a far too high a price for Scotland's freedom. It would want, if not all of the oil and gas reserves in the North Sea, certainly the lion's share of them. And in doing that would deprive Scotland of the ability to borrow and of the ability to keep itself heated and warm at an affordable price. And this is exactly what I think would happen in a negotiation between Scotland and England. If it happened, the price exacted by England for our freedom would be too high. They would want all of the oil and gas reserves. And they say, off you go, you can have your renewable energy. It wouldn't work because it would leave us vulnerable. We would not have enough different types of energy reserves to cover any fluctuations in the unit prices of these commodities. Remember, these are technically commodities. Kilowatt hours, a commodity. Oil barrels, a commodity. Cubic meters of gas are a commodity. And these are subject to price fluctuations across the globe. So the more of these we have, the better. We can basically balance one off against another. But the key thing that we must have as an independent state is our own food supply secure, so that we have enough food for all of our own needs first, and it must be affordable. And that means, to some extent, helping the farming community from central funds, investing in new equipment and new methods of farming, in new environmental techniques of farming without harming the environment. And also, I think, developing the forestry industry, although it's not linked to food, it's something else which would become a resource. So all these things are really, really important. And that brings me to the last part of today's programme, which is, I wouldn't call this a rumour, but it's been suggested that since Maihri Black has announced her intention to stand down at the next British general election and not seek re-election as an MP, has meant that a major talent, a major political talent, and remember, Maihri Black was first elected when she was just 20. She has a remarkable track record going back, nearly 20 years. And for a young woman of that age to achieve so much so early in her life is truly amazing. And she has a knack, as you probably have heard if you ever watch or listen to any of her speeches, of cutting through the garbage and getting to the bone on every single issue and mocking the entire grey-suited misogynistic nonsense that comes from Westminster every cut and turn. And it's been suggested that Maihri would be an excellent future First Minister for Scotland if she can be persuaded to stand as an MSP. It's an interesting idea. Remember that Maihri Black is an avowed socialist. Although she is in favour of independence and a member of the SNP, she's primarily a socialist. She believes in what I've just been talking about, actually, the renationalisation of energy resources, maybe the partial renationalisation of some food production. And I think because of these things, she would make an excellent First Minister in an independent Scotland, perhaps even an excellent First Minister in the transition between winning an independence referendum and actually taking that through to full independence. She would do the job. The question really is, would she be prepared to, and how would that work with her life balance? Because she said, and I think nobody could fault her for saying this, that spending the last 10 years 7 days a week zooming up and down between her home in Scotland and Westminster is going to wear anyone out, and your entire family life and your relationships suffer as a result. And she really needs to get home and be with her loved ones, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But if she did this, and she will plan to do this, she is going to do this, would she be prepared perhaps to run as an MSP with the possibility maybe of being selected to be the First Minister of Scotland in an SNP administration? Well, it's a possibility, and she would be very different from Humza, I think. Humza Yousaf is very much a kind of middle of the road guy. He is an avowed Republican. He doesn't believe in the monarchy either, although he has been forced, I suppose, by circumstance to accept the monarchy in Edinburgh and to go through the motions of shaking hands with the king and all the rest of it. However, I don't think Maihri Black would ever do that. I think Maihri Black would be quite happy to snub her nose at the king. I honestly do not think she would wear that at all. And in fact, to my mind at least, I think she would be a very combative First Minister, and she would be an excellent negotiator, because she would, as I say, cut straight to the point, and she would take the advice of the international legal opinion and experts on logistics of independence and how new countries form. So we live in interesting times. Humza, I think, is a transitional First Minister at the moment, until we actually see what strategy has emerged from the SNP's various meetings and its conference about what the direction will be for independence voting. I don't know. My own opinion is that we must empower our own Parliament in Edinburgh to hold a proper referendum, and we can only do that as sovereign Scots. And I suspect that eventually that is what must happen, because I honestly don't think that the United Kingdom will even bother to agree to negotiations, even if we won the next general election with all 59 seats and more than 50% of the vote. I still think they would just say no, because there are no consequences for them saying no. They can just keep saying no. It may be necessary for us just to take control of our own Parliament, and that would mean asserting our own personal individual sovereignty in some way, and there needs to be a mechanism to do that. And I suspect that just such a mechanism will appear in the not too distant future as well, and we'll be able to do this. So I have high hopes for Scotland. It has everything it needs to be a very successful and extremely wealthy small country. And the reason for that is that Scotland exports high value produce, produce which commands a premium price. If we just exported coal or rock, these commodities prices go up and down and the profit margins would be very low and we'd have a weak economy. But we don't. We can produce extremely high technology exports, very high quality foodstuffs of the highest quality that can command a high price and bring in valuable foreign earnings. And as long as we keep thinking that way, then our economy will not just survive, it will rapidly grow, and the immigration which England is so scared of will work in our favour, because we will need as many new Scots as possible to help us expand our economy and to grow it into a really flourishing new state, something which we can't do underneath the yoke of the Union. Anyway, that's it from me today. I hope you find today's programme interesting. I'm speculating a little bit here, but the King isn't the King of Scots. He can't be. And he can only be the King of Scots if we let him be the King of Scots. And because he hasn't sworn either of the two oaths that are required to be the King of Scots, he's never, ever going to be allowed to wear the crown. It's not just the honours of Scotland. That's just a fancy way of trying not to say the crown of Scotland, but it is the crown of Scotland. And you can look, but you can't touch. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.